Hey, everybody, we got mainframes and AI, the death of paper checks. And well, geez, how are we going to make that commute back to the office more livable now that we all seem to be going back that way? We'll be back in a minute. Hello, we're back. I'm Mike Vizard. I'm still in Ireland. So if any of you watched yesterday's show, you'll know that that's where I am. And I'll probably be camped out here for at least another week or so. But we have an awesome lineup of folks joining us today on the Techstrong Gang from all points in the globe, starting with Lisa Martin. You're not in your normal location today. So where are you?
I am in my normal location. I got a new backdrop for podcasting. So I covered up my funky wallpaper with these panels. So yeah, greetings from San Jose.
Well, how will we know what mood you're in if the wallpaper doesn't keep changing?
No, it's back there so I can take these off if I need to. And I'm kind of missing the vibrant bold. So we'll see.
All right. Also joining us, I believe, JP, this is your second time on the show?
That's right.
All right. JP Morgenthal. JP, where are you these days?
I'm in the Orlando, Florida, Central Florida area.
All right. Right next to Disney.
Not far.
All right. Cool. And another person who's normally in Florida anyway, but is not today is Chris Blask. Chris, where are you?
I am in Hamilton, Ontario. The snowbird cycle has begun. So it's like the sparrows returning to Capistrano. When I show up in Canada, it's a sure sign of spring.
All right. I feel like you just made it back to Florida in the boat, and now you're back up in Canada, but what do I know? All right. Well, let's jump into today's topics because yesterday, IBM launched the Z17, 60 years young and keep going strong with that mainframe. But this particular model has a new Telum processor in it. The Telum was designed to optimize the running of inference engines on the mainframe. And then they also are building something called Spry, which they previewed before, which will let you run the LLM offloaded from the core mainframe. And their argument is that all your data is on the mainframe, so your AI should be too. JP, you've been following AI closely. What do you make of this latest move by IBM?
It's pure IBM. The minute I saw it, I'm reminded of the announcement that IBM ported Java to the mainframe. And in fact, it triggers me a little because I thought it was a great move. Actually, I'm sorry, they put Java on the AS400, and I gave them great kudos for doing that. And then Sun gave me a big backhand across the face for making such a big deal of that. But I like that they get out there and they, look to see how their existing investments and integrate into the new environment. In today's world, though, it's a wait and see really how they're going to be able to sell this, right? Because I think the notion of racks of hardware that are scalable together, right, is become more popular. By the same token, many have bailed out of their own data center. I was with DXC for a very long time, and they were one of the organizations that were selling their maintenance contracts back to IBM, right, on their managed services. So it's who's buying mainframes, who's maintaining the mainframes anymore, where are they going to be operating? It sounds like, and a piece that's missing to the story is, does IBM envision this to almost be a cloud model where you buy the mainframe from them and then they will host it, manage it, and operate it for you? And if they can prove that the economics of performance work out really well from an inference standpoint, because there are many organizations that will be looking to privatize their inference capabilities and want to have very large models along the lines of what Meta is creating. It requires a lot of firepower to operate and run. And if they can do that, if they can demonstrate that that box is competitive and you don't need to try to go and acquire significant infrastructure from the likes of NVIDIA in order to make this work, I think they could have a play.
Yeah. So let me argue the case from their perspective, which is the whole notion of moving large amounts of data into the cloud to bring the data to an AI model is passe. They're actually going old school and saying, we need to go back to the pre-cloud days where we're bringing the compute to where the data already is. And if the data is already on the mainframe, then that's where the AI model should go. And the cost of moving data, and I think, JP, when you and I were much younger, somebody once said nothing good happens when you move data. So a lot of folks still kind of subscribe to that theory. So will people bring the models to where the data is, or are we going to move the data to the models?
So that sounds like a McCrory data gravity response. And
You can channel him if you're so inclined.
it'd be hard to channel him. I think it's a fair argument. Will will organizations want to migrate that data? But they're already doing it. Cloud providers have made it almost free to move data into these environments. It's the moving out that ends up costing you money. Amazon has taken steps to make it very easy to transport terabytes of data, even on hardware. Right? The old load it up on hard drives, put it on a truck, and ship it to us, and we'll connect the drives and copy it off that way. There are options. It's hard to make that argument anymore that nobody wants to take their mainframe data and move it into the cloud. I think they've been doing it for years to do business intelligence against. And it's not a novel concept. It's not like this is the first time, and all of a sudden businesses are now going to be faced with taking these petabytes of data and trying to make use of it, in a brand new function. So they may find that a lot of the data is already in the cloud.
That is true. Um, I also think that things are getting a little more fluid, and maybe people are getting more accomplished at moving data between different platforms. We have folks called data engineers these days, and maybe it's not as heavy a lift as it used to be.
The question is, what is the value of the data? And I think that nobody really is focused too deeply on that part yet. Um, Data cleansing, data value, understanding what's important. You don't want to wholesale just move everything. We've gone down the road of data warehousing where it's lossy, and you're getting summarization, and we know that doesn't work because there's always the question of, okay, but what led to that, right? So you have a chain of thought, if you will, a method of saying, I want to drill down deeper, and yet I've hit the bottom of the well because I've only moved so much data over. And I think that hybrid approach might be an answer here. It's, let me move some summarization up into the cloud. And then if I get to a point where I need to drill down, well, then I have AI. And then I can point my AI at my databases and start to use RAG approaches to go get at that data and explore further. And I have a lot of context to bring with me from the summarized data. And that's the piece I was missing before. So you have this up in the cloud, do this, data warehouse, summarize data, lossy, but I get to a point where really I'm only interested in 3 areas out of that where I wanted to drill down anyway. And then I can bring it back to where the actual detailed data is and use tools like AI to go investigate that further.
Lisa, what is your take? Is IBM kind of regaining its mainframe mojo a little bit here with some AI infusion? I mean, if I think back, I think it was around the turn of this decade, all 5 years ago, that IBM was at the forefront of all this AI stuff, and then they seemed to just
Yeah.
kind of fade away a little bit, and the next thing you know, everybody was talking about open AI.
This could definitely be that shot in the arm that they've been really working towards for the last few years. I think they're doing a good job of listening to their customers. Customers are hearing all the time, as we know, with all the conferences we go to, if you're not in AI, you're too late. And so being able to get that shot in the arm, that infusion of AI into the mainframe is something that I think, especially for their legacy customers, will help them modernize, become more competitive in the space. So it's something that's interesting to watch from a legacy company.
Mm. Chris, what's your take? Because one of the things that IBM is saying is that, there's all this data and it needs to be secure. And well, the mainframe is the most secure platform in the world, according to IBM.
I just want to take a moment to appreciate that it's 2025 and we're using the term mainframe, right? And I love that. A couple of years before and after 2020, I worked at Unisys, and I got reawoken to the fact that mainframes didn't go away. In the Unisys context, we would take truckloads of Dell servers, we would turn them into a mainframe, we would sell them to companies like Citibank, where they're running code written by Grace Hopper, that runs the entire world's financial existence, right? And as much as I like to talk change over time, what part of that is understanding how long it takes for things to go away and what doesn't go away. Innovation doesn't replace. It's a fully distributed world and everything's got to be, yes. I mean, there's huge iron mainframes, literally mainframes, running massive code, and everything, you and JP and Lisa are saying is, there's logic to this. Do I need to move all this data around? Mainframes, as you say, from a security perspective, yes, mainframes are, as we see them today, and as they've been all along, are more secure than taking a bunch of multi-use PCs and building your business on them. So there's a lot of intrinsic logic to this, right? Just because, the terms have changed doesn't mean the fundamentals have, right? How do you deal with these huge amounts of computing and inference and data transfer? Good questions. But among them is sometimes you don't move things, leave it where it was.
I like your point, and it was in the back of my head as you said it about using the term mainframe, because let's face it, they're not mainframes. They're essentially V-blocks. They are top-of-rack switches with high-speed backbone fiber networks that transfer gigabytes of data on the backplane, attached to very large storage arrays with lots of server capacity in between, and they're a virtual machine operating system on top of it that's running Linux, Windows, and other operating systems. So it's essentially a V-block. It's very big, bare metal, and we call it a mainframe because IBM sold it, right? But at the end of the day, I think at this point, mainframe is not a fair representation of what that box really is anymore.
But it has a Z label on it. It must be a mainframe. What are you talking about? All right. I'm not sure how this is going to play out, but one of the benefits of having a mainframe was the pricing model. Once you had the mainframe, you could run almost Linux workloads for free because you were charged based on the MIPS that normally was associated with ZOS. IBM hasn't quite said what the pricing model is for running these AI models on this platform, but might it be cheaper to run them on those platforms if I'm kind of going to tuck that into my existing IBM licensing agreements? JP, what do you think?
You raise a great question. I mean, at this point, are you gonna have, a fixed amount of MIPS that you're assigning that you're signing up for as a business? If so, IBM's really going to have to put forth a very complex calculation that equates to how many tokens equates, to how many MIPS, right? In order to understand, okay, that's great. If I pass in 10,000 tokens, what's it going to cost? How much of my MIPS am I using? Is there a direct correlation that they can make between, the inference capability and the amount of MIPS you signed up for? Those are good questions. And as you said, they haven't put forth any details about, what their pricing will be.
Mhm. Lisa, I think maybe IBM sometimes takes for granted that people understand what the mainframe is all about. But in this particular use case, they need to talk to data scientists, and there's a whole community of folks that they are not necessarily front and center with, in much the same way they were not front and center with application developers. So Does IBM kind of need to reinvent itself a little bit and start telling a different story in some shape or manner?
Yes, that's a great point. They have to be able to understand who their audience is for this. They probably, as you said, talking to other folks before, now they need to get with the data scientists. It's a different conversation. So I think you're right. I think it is a bit of a reinvention. They need to understand what the data scientists are doing, what their pain points are, what they need, what they're looking for to make sure that what they're designing fits that target audience. So that's definitely work that they're going to have to do there. In addition to the pricing work that you talked about, is making sure the audience really is invested and understands. I would imagine they've already been doing that to develop and design this new system, but they definitely need to be talking to the right folks and understand how is what they're designing applicable, how so, what needs to be tuned, and really listening to that audience is key for that.
It seems to me that they're betting on the fact that IT teams are going to take more responsibility for managing the inference engines. So that part might show up on the mainframe, but then there's the whole training of the AI models. Um, so I don't know, JP, who's in charge of AI these days in these organizations? Is it going to be the IT organization, the data science team, or somebody else altogether?
Right now, it's been left up to those who are starting to build the applications and where the application's been built. I think it's a little bit of shadow IT right now that has been bringing the use of AI into the business. And as far as a corporate or enterprise top-down strategy, I haven't seen that, enterprises have really moved forth in this direction. They're putting it out, out there as a, here's our stance on, and you have to break it down using AI for augmentation, using AI for automation. How do we validate what data can be passed into the inference engines? What kind of tools are we making available or enforcing to ensure we don't have data loss that is part of this process? Things like that are part of your AI strategy. I'm sure that companies are putting things together, but there's no guidebook. There's I've seen a couple of things put out there by, Google and others, you know, along the lines of here's an AI strategy. But at the end of the day, you it's my belief that you actually have to go and build your first application and and decompose it all the way down to understand for your organization how you're going to make this happen from an operational standpoint. So you need to actually do it so you understand all the pieces so that you can apply operational characteristics and requirements to managing that in a production manner. And I don't see that that's been done. I see a lot of proof of concepts and a lot of minimal viable product just being thrown out there. And I think there's a lot of lessons that are going to be learned, as we've seen with other technologies, when people try to jump on the bandwagon very early.
Chris, JP is describing something you might consider rational behavior, but I'm not sure I believe that there's rational behavior in IT organizations. I think that sometimes we're going to have 6 different teams build 12 different things and then argue with each other about whose implementation should become the quote unquote de facto standard because mine's better than yours. So, um, does this require some more adult supervision, maybe?
Well, let me kind of back out a little bit, right? Security assessments, right? This terrible word in security, which is people coming in to tell you what you're doing wrong, right? This, I think, again, just from a security perspective, we're slowly getting to the point where where we should have been in the beginning, in an ideal world where we understand who we are in the first place, what we're trying to achieve, and therefore put security in place instead of say, hey, there's this security technology, where do I stuff it in my organization? And I think, similarly, to this point, how much real gestalt organizational coordination is there and how much adoption of cool tech by business units and organizations doing things? So I think that's the real question. How organized and considered is this? And JP, what you're saying, we're at this point in this topic where there are some guides around, and I think most of the people are probably sort of probably understating this, but ad hoc adopting things that are working for them, and less building coordinated strategies, that fit the overarching goals.
There was a conversation I participated in yesterday on LinkedIn And we're security people, people who are actually implement security postures and have experience. We're discussing MCP, which is the new protocol for linking tools into LLMs. And the security person said, "Yeah, I mean, how do we trust these things? What we have all these servers that were created. How do we know that they were created by who they say they were? How do we know that when they call back out to the internet, to some other application, that they are doing so in a honest manner, or that their intention is not bad?" And truth is, there isn't nothing, right? It's all experimental right now. You're taking the word. Hopefully you went to Salesforce to get your MCP from Salesforce, but a lot of people are downloading this from GitHub, or they're downloading it from Hugging Face. And the question is, well, what's the validity of the server there? How do I know it's valid? And I gave them some rational explanation, like you say I do in an irrational world, about, these things are running locally, and if you downloaded it, you have the code. So, I mean, you do have an opportunity to validate there. A lot of this is open source, but, the truth of the matter is, they have a valid point, right? Where's the App Store for MCP servers with validated, servers? Because you're authenticating and you're giving them the ability to act as you, impersonate you against applications. I see a great man in the middle attack opportunity for anybody who wants it.
Mhm. In theory, there's going to be like an API gateway that speaks MCP that's going to provide you those capabilities. But the number of people I know who equate API gateways to AI is zero. So,
Well, Cloudflare actually put forth a spec that does that today. They're actually built a remote MCP protocol that works with the current design instead of creating yet a new approach. So if you have an existing MCP server, it'll still work with the Cloudflare capability. So they're the only ones I've seen that really, put forward something, and then there's a lot of discussion about specification at the MCP protocols.
all right. I would shout out one thing with IBM is that they seem to be embracing more standards in the mainframe. So maybe to your point, it really is just a big ass server, but you can use things that you use for DevOps and everywhere else now with the mainframe. So is the mainframe just another node on the distributed network? Because we used to separate distributed networks from mainframes, but maybe it's all just one big happy distributed network. JP, what do you think?
I'm interested. I mean, this is the first I'm hearing about the Telum 2. I'm really interested in how that compares to, some of the NVIDIA product that's come out, some of the ARM products that are coming out with regard to their ability to handle GPU calculations and be able to support inference capabilities. I think that's the secret sauce. If you ultimately, right? I mean, and that's what everybody's after. That's where NVIDIA came out as a strong player in the AI space, is their capability to produce these chips that support AI. And if Telum 2 has some secret sauce, that's what we need to see. If they have a competitive stance there with these chips, that's a major play. That's a major opportunity for them.
All right. We're not entirely sure, folks, if this is your grandfather's IBM Redux or something entirely different, but stay tuned. We're about to find out. We'll be back in a second.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
All right, folks, we're moving on to our next topic, which is the death of the paper check. It's been a long time forecasted, and people have been working on it. And now, even the federal government says that it will get rid of federal checks one day soon. As soon as I get off this couch, kind of move. But hey, it's a step in the right direction. Lisa, what is your take on what's going on with this? And um, I know some folks who are probably as old as I am who probably can't imagine a world without paper checks, but has the
I
time come?
know. I think it has. This is not anything new. We've been seeing these initiatives for a very long time, but just a week or so ago, the president signed, I think it was March 25th, another executive order to eliminate paper checks for all like federal disbursements, including intra-governmental payments, benefits, vendor payments, tax refunds. It goes into effect soon. I believe it's September 30th. So in about 5 months' time, payments will be made electronically. And the White House is saying it's not just the exposure and the risk of fraud behind this decision. It would also save the federal government millions of dollars, reduce delays. I saw something in terms of delays that federal checks are 16 times more likely to be reported lost or stolen or returned undeliverable versus an electronic funds transfer. So I think it's about time. We do know the Trump administration has really been embracing technology. They've obviously from supporting AI through the creation of Stargate to establishing Doge with a mission of, in theory, modernizing federal technology and software to maximize governmental efficiency and productivity. And in fact, this executive order comes with a marketing campaign, guys. The Secretary of the Treasury, in coordination with different heads of agencies, they're going to implement a really public awareness campaign to inform people that are getting federal payments. I wish I was one getting a tax return. Never happens. Of this transition. Well, like I said, it isn't anything new. We've seen this over the last 30 years. It's going to be interesting, though, to see how this impacts banking systems that might be more legacy. Is there going to be challenges there? Is it going to force a lot of the banking organizations to do a massive technology upgrade? I think it could very well be. But I think it's about time we move to things to being more electronic and more secure. I'm sure Chris would agree.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really, so I worked in the early 80s at a plant in Canada that made Sears catalogs, right? And it made Sears catalogs for 100 years. And everybody working there was certain that it would be making Sears catalogs forever because that's the way the world was. And, obviously, they don't make Sears catalogs there anymore. And paper checks today sort of remind me of, when you get a refund for something, you can pay for it this instant. It can be shipped tomorrow, and you get a refund. Refund and takes 3 to 4 weeks, 6 weeks. It's like, seriously? In the modern world, it to be clear, if you're refunding me for something, then you should be able to do that transaction in the same period of time it took to make it. And it's the same sort of thing. It's a legacy holdover. There's no logic behind it, but companies make a couple extra points by being slow on their refunds. So paper checks, yeah, they're expensive, slow, unreliable, insecure, and they exist. I here in Canada, a friend who works at a metal shop that's been in business, a family business for years and years, and they have paper checks because in her 80s, the couple that owns it, she's been writing paper checks all her life, and she's not stopping. That's wonderful, but large organizations mailing out lots of paper no, this is 2025. Let's stop.
Is she the lady that I'm standing behind in the supermarket when she's
I was just gonna bring that up. The only thing is, what is the service for somebody that doesn't have a bank account?
There's going to have
Right?
to be exceptions. Great point, JP. Yes.
I haven't seen that as corresponding information, right? Because I'm all for efficiency. I'm all about automation and efficiency and productivity. It's what I do for a living. But at the end of the day, you're a government and you have to take care of your citizens. That's your primary goal. That's your primary responsibility. And unfortunately, in this country, we have a significant size population of people who don't have bank accounts anymore because banks really don't want to provide a service for people who only have, live paycheck to paycheck. There's no value in them in providing that service. So how do you used to get a check? You could go into a check cashing facility and you cash the check. How do you cash digital money? Is it going to be like a WIC card where you now have this debit card? But that's still lossy. You could lose it, but at least it's like American Express traveler's checks, right? It's traceable. Anybody who tries to use that WIC card, they need the PIN, right? So it's safer, right? So there are options, but what are the options, right? I just want to hear.
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right. And from a security perspective, honestly, I feel, I feel like I've been corrected, right? Because yeah, as a technologist, yeah, let's get rid of paper checks. But to be clear, yeah, section of the population, they're already the victims of all these cash checking scam organizations. You see them all over, any neighborhood across the country that is not middle class or middle class. This is the banking system for millions and millions of Americans, and it's a ripoff to begin with. And yeah, I would have to think through this. What is the actual impact on the vulnerable populations of this? Great point. Because again, they're already the least able to respond and the least well served.
I understand the president is getting mountains of pennies ready in the Department of Treasury that he'll just FedEx to people if he needs to, right?
Because that's efficient.
Super efficient. Have we become, and I guess at least I'll ask you, but are
Yeah.
we really on the cusp of becoming a cashless society? I mean, honestly, I can go an entire week without spending cash these days, maybe even
Oh,
more. And
same.
so,
Yeah. Yeah.
mm,
I think so. Again, it's going to depend on the population of who we're talking about. JP brings up a great point. There's a large amount of the population that goes to check cashing places, and that's not going to change. But for a lot of businesses that need to modernize, especially as the younger generations mature, are going to expect a cashless society. I never have cash with me. I've got everything stored in my phone. I can use that. Or if I have to go old fashioned, I use a card, which always feels very dated. But I think we are progressing towards pockets of cashless societies. I don't think it's going to be this blanket overall transition come September 30th, 2025. But I think in pockets we're going to be seeing it. And I hope that it does maximize the efficiency of the government, the productivity, reduce the risks of fraud and things like that to make people safer and be able to get their funds that they're owed in a safer, faster way. But I think there's going to be part of it's also cultural too. Like you talk about the lady at the grocery store who's probably, a silent generation person, maybe a boomer, probably not, who's not going to stop writing checks. And so they're going to be the ones that are not going to embrace cashlessness. But I think as the younger generations and we have more generations coming, I think we will have no choice because I think they'll force it.
Yeah, I'll tell you industries that, well, two come to mind immediately that would really be upended by a pure cashless society. The first is tips, because yeah, how do you? Because there are certain areas if you can leave a tip digitally, like a credit card, but they don't get the full percentage. So if you leave them 5, they get 4.20. Whereas you leave them a $5 bill, they get a $5 bill. The other one is casinos, right? When you sit down at a table, they don't have, there's no way, there's no system of getting cash, from the window or from the casino that you can use at a table right now that gives you the pure amount. Right now, if you take a credit card to the casino window, you're getting charged a fee, right? So what's the medium for buying chips at a table?
all right. So you're pointing out two fundamental things that I might argue are scams. I'm here in the west of Ireland. I was in England last week, and you know what you didn't see since I got here? Tipping, because everybody's got a job and it's built into their salary. And we're not trying to scam a bunch of people out of money because the owner doesn't want to charge a full rate for something because he can't afford to pay the people a living wage. So we made up this tipping little scam. And so maybe it's time to retire tipping. Um, and as far as electronic fees go on cards, I never understood this either. So let me get this straight. I don't go to instead of going to the bank, I use my electronic card. You charge me for that, so I'm not using the teller, and so now I'm paying more for the electronic transfer than I would if I actually used the teller in some cases. In other places, I've noticed that I get charged more for going up to use the teller instead of the electronic transfer, which makes a little more sense to me sometimes, but there are more fees in electronic transfers than you can shake a stick at. And all of it is bogus, as far as I can tell.
It's middlemen, it's brokers. It's a broker industry. It was designed as a broker industry, and people need to get paid for running the service, right? Everything started out as a distributed network, and everybody who runs a node in the network wants to get paid. So yeah, in order to get rid of that fee, you'd have to create a point, which we can today, but you'd have to get back to a point-to-point, architecture where an ATM machine could, doesn't cost anything, you know, along the way, for the transaction, and it can go directly to your bank, right? And that's what's missing, right? If I go to a generic ATM machine hosted, let's say again by a casino, right? Somebody has to pay for that machine, the maintenance on that machine, getting that machine filled, and it doesn't belong to any one particular bank. Okay, but the casino's offering it as a service, so it should be free, but they have to pay all the brokers. Now, if there was a protocol that said, "Oh, you're with Chase, great. I have the ability to communicate directly to Chase. I'm just going to, send my transaction over to Chase. It's not going to cost anybody anything because it's point to point. Now I can. Chase says, "Yep, here's the money. You can release it," and it drops it in my account. That gets rid of that whole network. And that's what Zelle was initially supposed to be, which is why all the banks jumped on board, but it didn't turn into that.
I just had this issue yesterday, so let me elaborate. And again, you guys seem to think that paper checks are less safe than electronic transfers, and yet my son in college is calling me up because somebody raided his bank for $300, and now he's waiting for the bank to put that money back into his account, which won't happen till Friday. So guess who gets a text saying, "Dear old dad, can you help me out?" So sure enough, I'm like, first thing I go to, well, it's my bank. I'll go to Zelle. Zelle wants me to therefore enter into this transfer. Great. I've transferred money to him 1,000 times. And then they're like, well, here comes a text. You got to wait 8 minutes for the text, but I'm in Europe. So I don't know where that text went, but it never arrived. So the next thing I did is I went to Venmo, sent my son 50 to, well, $100 at the end. And, that'll tie him over till Friday. And Venmo got it there in 0.5 seconds. So I got to say something about our little electronic banking system. It feels like the online ticketing scourge we were talking about before and a couple of shows ago, where everybody's got its hand out now that it costs too much to do things electronically unless you got the right service and you know what you're doing, which in itself is crazy.
Which raises the whole question so much of Wall Street has, which is, why is PayPal stock so low when it provides such a critical service and it's leveraged? It's seriously undervalued, stock. I just don't understand what happened to PayPal.
I guess it just went out of fashion. I think, it's kind of like the mainframe of electronic payments.
But they also own Venmo. See, here's the thing. They're also Venmo. They're PayPal and Venmo. So, I mean, what percentage of overall non-banking transactions do they own? It's very high.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, Chris, are you sure that electronic payments are more secure than paper checks? Because there are some people who would beg to differ, but thoughts?
No, in short, right? That's the wrong question of a security person. Sure, certain, 100%. No, there's no such thing, right? It's all in context, and I can't help thinking as we're thinking about this, right? Yeah, the first half of the last century, if you're into technology, you watch airplanes, right, from Canvas to the B-52, which is still flying today, because a basic airframe is a basic airframe, and there's only so much you can do with that. And similarly, the last 50 years we've done this technology thing, and everything we talk about at a show like this, right? This is new, this is changing. The electronics, nothing has settled into a pattern, right? Long enough as it has in other disciplines like aviation, where you can put predictability on it and say this system is well put together or not. And again, that's sort of the world we're in. I think several more decades. We still have mainframes. We are establishing certain patterns. but we keep doing entirely new things with emergent properties that we can't predict in advance. So yeah, generally speaking, yeah, electronic transfer is traceable. We know how that works. A paper check, can get out in the world and do weird things, but it depends.
Make
Now, I
sure
think
your
this,
son puts two-factor authentication on his bank account.
I guess that might help, but I heard that they figured out how to get around that too. So who knows what's going on? But, and I have no way of actually verifying any of those statements because, kids in college, shit happens.
Yes, it does often.
All right, folks, we'll be back in a minute. We're going to move on to our next subject, which is how do we get from A to B without driving ourselves crazy? Back in a minute.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey, folks, we're back with one of my pet peeves out there. So we are now convincing, or at least ordering, everybody back to the office. So we have return to office scenarios. There are more people on the road. There are more people using mass transit. Mass transit doesn't appear to be any cheaper in New York. In fact, it might even be more expensive than ever. And even though more people are using it, here's my issue of the day, right? So if we have people go back to the office, in effect, they are now shelling out money to drive. They got to pay for gas. They got to get a bus fare or a train ticket or whatever it may be. And that adds up. I think in New York, the cost of a Metro North ticket is about $200 a month. If you think about this for a minute, sending everybody back to the office essentially is the taking back of what they perceive to be a raise they got during COVID when they worked from home, and that helped them navigate some of the costs and expenses. Theoretically, all these people are going to be a lot more productive in the office, but as far as I can tell, they're more pissed off than ever because they just fought traffic to come into the office. So they're not exactly thrilled to be there, and it's not a great experience for all concerned sometimes. Chris, I'm going to dump this one in your lap because you're like the world's biggest commuter all the way from Canada to Florida and back again a couple of times a year. But what makes sense here, and can tech help us here?
What makes sense is what works, and tech can help us. So 1990, South Carolina, General Electric, Jack Walsh was putting in a global video conference center. And I just happened to be there, and when that was installed, and took it over and did silly things with it. And the efficiencies, being able to crawl under a machine and point a camera at something to a vendor engineer in Germany, as opposed to getting that person on the plane to fly across the ocean. It's so obvious. And thinking about that then, looking out into the future, what does this mean when everyone gets it? Right? And as you say, since then, I have virtually always been working remote, into the 90s. In fact, the day my first child was born, first day of summer 1995, I called in the office as deep into the firewall market, and I said, I'm not coming in the office for a month. I'm staying here at home with the telephone, doing the same things I'm doing, but I'm not moving from this spot. And people in the office couldn't believe it. I was like, "You're serious?" Like, "Oh yeah." And 90. Let's move forward a little bit. 1999, the great Stuart Phillips. When I'm working at Cisco, I'm running the firewall product lines, which are a real dog's breakfast mess at the time. And we're competing the whole firewall space at the time with my encryption or my thing or better than your technical whatever. And Stuart Phillips redid that messaging. Like in a set of slides I carry to this day that said things like, my favorite slide to this purpose is that virtual private networks, IPsec, was a big deal at the time, allows you to have remote workers. And remote workers cost less money and work more hours, making you more profitable and competitive. So if you'd like to not lower your costs and increase your profitability and be more competitive, then don't buy a Cisco Pix or an iOS firewall and use VPNs and get remote workers. And the irony that in 1999, in 2000, there weren't a lot of actual remote worker operations, right? I can say it now, but that actual economic benefit for most of those customers in those days, they did not realize that then because, it takes more than that to change things. And it was, not just the pandemic. We slowly over the last couple of decades have moved to remote work. The pandemic exercised that a lot. And to the topic of this segment, there's certain valid and invalid, thoughts about bringing people back to the office. There is more to being productive than just a camera and a microphone. You actually have to have a business process and get the value and the relationships. And on the flip side of that is some folks, particularly older folks and executives, are just used to seeing people by the paper shredder and want to bring them back there, even though it's not a bloody good idea. So we're going to mix that right now. It's remote work is overhyped and not used properly in many, many cases. Going back to work is nostalgia for a past that didn't really exist and won't give you the business value you think either.
JP, for as long as I can remember, somebody's been telling me that they finally figured out how to make that routing algorithm work so that the traffic lights will be aligned and we can get that last mile of delivery optimized, and we'll be able to make everything optimally run across any kind of networking thing, include which traffic really is a giant exercise in networking. And 30 years later, I've still not seen it working anywhere. So is this just a problem that tech can't solve? Or, maybe, I don't know, is there some secret thing in the reasoning model of the LLM that's going to figure this out finally?
I don't think it's a problem that's designed yet for AI, because it goes first and foremost to the sensor network, and you're dealing with physical motion sensors, identifying and being able to perceive the traffic pattern that's currently where you are currently in any point in time, and then being able to analyze that and then retrofit the network to support that. Now, I mean, they do have built-in safeguards. So even though your horror stories in New York, they do have the ability to enable an ambulance to go down and turn all the lights green, or police to have all green lights so that they can get through in an emergency situation. I don't know how easy it is to enable that. There's probably a lot of bureaucracy and red tape. And it's that bureaucracy and red tape, I wonder, that holds up the ability to allow them to turn over responsibility to a sensor network to actually measure this. It's almost like we must have a human in the loop, air traffic controller, so to speak. Well, once you get a human in the loop making decisions, they can't operate nearly as fast as the need for the traffic network patterns that are emerging and dissipating. And that's where I think they get into trouble, right? You have to put some trust into this system. And I don't think that they've done that yet.
Lisa, let me tell you a story about what is going on in New York here with there's all these motorbikes now, or little mini bikes and whatever they are, up and down the roads, and they go really fast, and the city's starting to figure out that they're running into people and people are getting seriously hurt. So the solution to this problem is to increase the frequency at which the lights turn red so that it forces those motorbikes to slow down so that they can't get up ahead of steam, which sounds great on paper, except for one thing. Now everybody who drives is pissed off because the light changes every 2 blocks. So,
Yep, that would be very frustrating.
so is there, how would you market that as a plus, or how does somebody who's in charge of a city that's trying to provide these services kind of come up with something that people will kind of understand, appreciate, or maybe they should just come up with a different plan? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a marketing challenge because you're going to have some people that are going to see ostensible value. If there are statistics in terms of the reduction that these red lights frequency would make in traffic accidents or even fatalities, you can use that data from a campaign standpoint to try to really reinforce that there is value here. But you're also going to have the other folks on the other side of the spectrum who are going to get so annoyed because the lights are turning red too frequently. I have a few red lights, street lights in San Jose here that are awful. And if I hit a yellow, I know I'm going to be here for 3 or 4 minutes. And it's frustrating, especially if you're trying to get somewhere, you got an appointment and you're looking at your watch. But I think the challenge from a marketing standpoint is trying to bring forth the positives. And I think data collection will help to do that, can help to do that. It's a matter of how the governments actually use the message and how they're delivering that on a consistent basis to their constituents. San Jose, my city, where I'm sitting here right now, is actually investing in cloud-based transit signals at it's almost 200 intersections. And it's saying, hey, we're going to reduce delays for numerous bus routes. And so I think that decision, that technology decision, can demonstrate how data can be used to improve efficiency and attractiveness of public transit. But we have to have that message really crisp and clear, and the value has got to be there.
Mhm. Chris, there's this light in my town. It's notorious for being slow. So what does everybody do? They deliberately don't go that way. And as a result, there are now more traffic than ever going on all these other side streets just so everybody can skip that light. And probably we're expending more gas and it's taking us twice as long to get where we're going. Um, is this some sort of like fault in our human condition that we can't kind of figure out cause and effect when we change one thing? We don't understand the implications, or is just somebody out there kind of looking at a two-dimensional spreadsheet and trying to flip a button and doesn't think it through?
The former, thinking through, emergent properties is just hard. And most of us are focused on one individual task at a time. But I'm thinking, a good analogy, I would say that this is my litmus strip, my most important sort of measure of where we are with this ability to work remotely and so forth. And that's the virtual conference, right? I want the ability to go and interact with people as if I was there in person. And I can't be more clear about how far away we are from that, right? This is wonderful. We can do this right here. We can have meetings and almost all my business, my work is done this way. It's wonderful, but it's not the same. Every time, even in our industries, our technology industries, we say, all right, we're going to have a mixed hybrid conference. It'll be part in person and some people will be remote. It's like the 90s. Anybody working remotely during those days remember being the voice on the speakerphone in the middle of the room. There's 8 or 12 people in the room, or we're like Charlie's Angels, where just this little voice trying to sneak up over it. Yeah, so we're really, really, really quite a long way from the real remote interaction that gets the kind of value and business value. Being in person with someone and being able to talk for 5 minutes, you can't replace that. And we can replace that electronically, but not today. And not next year, and not this decade. So, as I sort of said at the beginning, I understand. I am skeptical of anyone saying we need to get people back to work, but I understand there may be very good reasons. But that's sociology, how we get value out of human interaction, that needs to be studied, not the technology.
I don't know. I just think we have to adapt. And speaking of adapting, I want to congratulate Chris on turning 50. That's 50 years of adapting, right?
60, Pat. 60. Yes.
60. Oh, geez.
60.
Come back to that. The big 60. Geez, now we're getting serious.
Bring it. It's
All
all
right.
bonus rounds at this point. I've outlived most of my ancestors. Do your ancestry.com, all these little short lines. We can complain about getting older, but as far as I'm concerned, it's bonus rounds on Defender now. So it's all good.
All right. I just want all these traffic issues solved before Chris turns 70. Think we can get that?
You better get on that then.
I do think we have an accelerator, and that's what I think the biggest thing that we'll get out of AI innovation is going to be right now is you're going to see a high acceleration of answers to things that before just were taking. Not that we didn't necessarily have an answer, but it's going to speed up now significantly.
Yeah,
Yep.
That's a great point. Yeah,
because I'm going to ask the car, what's the fastest damn way around that annoying traffic light?
Exactly. And it better have an answer.
There you go. All right. Hey guys, thanks for being on the show today. It was great. Insights were awesome. And I want to thank everybody else for watching the show with us. And please stay tuned. There's an awesome amount of content coming up right behind us and the rest of the Techstrong TV lineup. Until then, we'll see you tomorrow.